pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, so if we could have the roll call. Madam Clerk?
Mr. Jamie Girardi?
Here.
Mr. Derek Potlitz?
Here.
Mr. Peter Hansel?
Here.
Mr. John Moody?
Here.
Mr. Christopher Poole?
Here.
Mr. Chris Williams?
Here.
And Chairman Charles Gray.
Here. Chris Williams is virtually here. I think I heard him there for a second.
You did, Mr. Chairman.
Oh, thank you very much, Chris. All right. So do we have any minutes to approve?
Yeah, motion to approve the minutes from the January 19th, March 2nd, and April 6th meetings.
Okay, we have a motion, we have a second. Further discussion on the motion? If not, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Motion carries. I'd like to welcome everybody who's here today. We're the Planning Commission, and we're appointed by the County Commission, and we meet twice monthly. We serve as a local planning agency, and we hold public hearings and transmit to the Board of County Commissioners recommendations of comprehensive plan amendments, land development code amendments, rezoning, and conditional use requests. The Planning Commission is the final decision-making body for special exceptions, certain appeals, variance requests, certain alternative standard requests. However, final decisions may be appealed to the Board of County Commissioners. Anyone that's in opposition to any comprehensive land amendment, land development, code amendment, rezoning, conditional use, or any item where the Planning Commission transmits a recommendation to the Board of County Commissioners, it's important for you to attend the appropriate Board of County Commission meeting. For those of you who are not familiar with the format of our meetings, they are as follows. 3 sections. We have continuances, and they are items where either the applicant or the staff have requested a continuance for any number of reasons, and it's been our tradition to grant a continuance request unless there are extenuating circumstances. We have consent items, and those are items where we've not received any objections from the staff or the public, and they're going to be read off one at a time. And if there's something that's on consent that you'd like to be discussed or heard today, when I read off the item, please raise your hand. We'll pull it from consent. Then there are the regular items. Anything pulled from consent will go on to the regular items. And then we have other items that are regular items that will be discussed fully today. And you'll have a chance, the applicant will make a presentation, and you'll have a chance to respond or ask questions. I don't think, has there anybody any requests for extra time?
Mr. Chair, we have no requests for extra time.
Okay, very good. For everybody here today, please, if you have a cell phone, put it on the silent position so we don't interrupt anyone. Before we start the meeting, we want to open up for anyone that's here to speak to anything that's not on today's agenda. Is there anyone here that wants to speak to something that's not on the agenda? I don't see anyone.
And Mr. Chair, we don't have anyone on WebEx signed up to speak for any of the items nor for public comment.
All right, thank you very much. So if any of you plan to give testimony today, if you'll stand and raise your right hand and be sworn. Anybody who plans to come up and talk? Okay.
Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give is the truth, so help you God?
All right, thank you. Ms. Denise?
Just for confirmation, did we approve the March 2nd and April 6th meeting minutes with that motion, or was it just the January?
It's for all 3.
All 3.
Okay. I just wanted to say that.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, Planning Commission members. Denise Hernandez, Planning and Development. First item is PC4, which is PDD 23CU05, which is conditional use for Golf Vision 2 LLC Verizon Wireless. The item is withdrawn from consideration and no further action is required by the Planning Commission.
All right, thank you.
We're going to move on to item PC5, which is PDD 237692. It's a zoning amendment in the name of Rogers Flooring, Inc. It's for a change in zoning from AC Agricultural District to an AR1 Agricultural Residential District. The request is to continue the item to a date uncertain.
Okay, is there anyone here to speak on this item? Okay, let's go to the next one.
Item PC6 is a zoning amendment, PDD 237705, RBR Properties of West Florida LLC, RBR Properties for change in zoning from an R1 Rural Density Residential District to an I1 Light Industrial Park District. Request is to continue the item to the July 20th, 2023 Planning Commission meeting at 1:30 in Newport Richey.
All right, anyone here to speak on this item? No one?
Do we need to do the continuances individually?
No, we're going to do
Okay.
them all at once.
Shall I move to the next item?
Yeah.
Thank you. PC7, PDD 237713, zoning amendment, Wen T, change in zoning from an R1 Rural Density Residential District to an R3 Medium Density Residential District. The request is to continue the item to the July 20th, 2023 Planning Commission meeting at 1:30 in Newport Richey.
All right, is anyone here for that item? I don't see anyone.
Following is PC8, PDD 237716, a zoning amendment at Columns at Bear Creek MPUD Master Plan Unit Development, substantial modification, 52 Associates LLC and 52 Associates Phase 2 LLC. The request is to continue the item to the July 20th, 2023 Planning Commission meeting at 1:30 in Newport Richey.
All right, anyone here for that one? No one. Next.
Following is PC9, PDD 237703, zoning amendment in the name of Dominion Anclote MPUD Master Plan Unit Development, District School Board of Pasco County. The request is to continue the item to the July 20th, 2023 Planning Commission meeting at 1:30 in Newport Richey.
Okay, is there anyone here to speak on that one? See no one?
PC10, which is PDD 23CU03, conditional use for Home Elite LLC and Priya Properties LLC Urban 54 Estates. The request is to continue the item to the July 20th, 2023 Planning Commission meeting at 1:30 in Newport Richey.
Okay, is there anyone here for that one? See no one?
PC11 is PDD 23CU21 for a construction demolition debris disposal facility operating permit and conditional use amendment request for Coastal Landfill of Florida LLC. The request is to continue the item to the July 20th, 2023 Planning Commission meeting at 1:30 in Newport Richey.
Thank you. Anyone here for that one?
I'll ask that you vote on that separate because I have a conflict.
You do? Okay, so we're going to pull that one and vote on that separately.
Shall I move on to the next one?
Is that the last continuance?
No, there are two more
Okay,
continuance
all right,
items.
Go ahead.
So this next item, PC12, is PDD 230190 for a comprehensive plan amendment under CPAS 2229 Dominion Anclote. And you would be sitting as the LPA on this item. It would be the request to continue the item to the July 20th, 2023 Planning Commission LPA meeting at 1:30 in Newport Richey.
All right, anyone here for that item? No one? Okay.
And then we're going to move to APC 15 on your addendum. And that one is PDD 237662. It's a zoning amendment in the name of Greenfield Del Webb River Reserve MPUD Parkway Hills LLC. The request is to continue the item to the July 20th, 2023 Planning Commission meeting at 1:30 in Newport Richey.
All right, and anyone here to speak on that item? No one.
And those are your continuance items.
All right, then I'd like to hear a motion to approve the continuances that we just read through, with the exception of, which one was that, John?
PC 11.
PC 11. We're going to vote on that separately.
So, Mr. Chair, I make a motion to approve PC 5, PC 6, PC 7, PC 8, PC 9, PC 10, PC 12, and APC 15 to their respective continuance dates.
I'll second that.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion on that motion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like
Aye.
sign? Okay. And as PC
You need to do it
11,
as a roll call, I'm sorry.
Oh, okay, yeah, that's right. Thanks, Chris.
Sorry.
I know, you have to get to your golf game.
Mr. Jamie Girardi,
Aye.
Mr. Derek Pontlett,
Aye.
Mr. Peter Hansel,
Aye.
Mr. John Moody,
Aye.
Mr. Christopher Poole,
Aye.
Mr. Chris Williams,
Aye.
and Chairman Charles Gray.
Aye. Okay, now we can have a motion on PC 11.
Motion to approve PC 11.
Second.
We have a motion and a second, noting that Mr. John Moody is
You can do that when you do the roll call.
abstaining, right?
You're gonna do a roll call anyway, so you can
Yeah,
abstain
oh,
when you
that's
do the roll
right,
call.
that's right. That's right.
Mr. Jamie Girardi,
Aye.
Mr. Derek Pontlett,
Aye.
Mr. Peter Hansel,
Aye.
Mr. John Moody,
Present.
Mr. Christopher Poole,
Aye.
Mr. Chris Williams,
Aye.
and Chairman Charles Gray.
Aye. Okay,
All right, great. We're going to move on to item PC 13. On that item, a few things. There are ex-parte communications between the applicant and Mr. Derek Pontlett, Mr. Chris Poole, Mr. Peter Hansel, Mr. John Moody, and Mr. Chuck Gray. Also on that item, Mr. Jamie Girardi will be abstaining. He has filled out a Form 8B voting conflict on that item. PDD 237590 is a zoning amendment under the name of Mitchell Ranch East Mixed Use to MPUD Master Plan Unit Development for Mitchell Ranch Partnership Limited and Breezel Limited. It's for a rezoning request from a C2 General Commercial and AC Agricultural District to an MPUD Master Plan Unit Development District to allow for the development of a maximum of 322,000 square feet of commercial retail, 100,000 square feet of medical office, 260 senior apartment units, and 400 multifamily units and associated infrastructure on approximately 194.12 acres. Comes to you with a recommendation of approval with conditions as included in your agenda packet.
okay. The applicant present? Okay, anything to present? Mr. Hobby, okay. Is there anyone here to object? Okay,
And we don't have anyone signed up to speak on the item.
all right, very good. So do I hear a motion?
Move to approve.
I had a question.
Who did?
It's Chris.
Oh,
Chris.
Chris. There you are again. I see you. Go ahead.
Just a quick question. Is this part of a larger comp plan that came in a long time ago, or is this totally separate?
Yes. It's part of the, Western Hub.
Western
It's
Hub.
part of the Western Hub, correct.
Okay, all right. Thank you.
All right.
I'll move to approve item PC 13.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Further discussion on the motion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? I mean, we have to have a roll call vote, I'm sorry.
Oh, yep.
I'll remember here in a minute.
Mr. Jamie Girardi,
I'm not voting on this item.
Mr. Derek Pontlett,
Aye.
Mr. Peter Hansel,
Aye.
Mr. John Moody,
Aye.
Mr. Christopher Poole,
Aye.
Mr. Chris Williams,
Aye.
and Chairman Charles Gray.
Aye.
And that is the end of your consent agenda items. APC 16 and APC 17 are being pulled. So there are some folks here who
Okay.
would like to speak on those items.
All right.
So we'll just move on to APC 16.
Okay.
Good afternoon. Hayat Mazzilli, staff planner with Long Range Planning, and I will be presenting item PC 16. PC 16 is actually PDD 230326. It's a small-scale comprehensive plan amendment in the name of CPAS 2302 Shady Hills. Let's start with an overview of the project. The applicant is proposing a small-scale comprehensive plan amendment to change the future land use designation from Res 1, residential one dwelling unit per gross acre, to COM, commercial, on approximately 1.30 acres. The purpose of this amendment is to remedy a conflict zoning which was established when the comprehensive plan was adopted in 1989. The subject site is located west of Shady Hills Road and south of Bosley Drive. The existing zoning on the site is C2 General Commercial Zoning District. Now let's discuss the subject site, starting with the location. As you can see on this map, the subject site is generally located in the North Market area. This is a zoomed-in view or aerial view of the exact location of the subject site. As you can see, it is located off Shady Hills Road, approximately 635 feet south of Bosley Drive, and the subject site is currently vacant.
Okay.
And this is a zoomed out aerial of the subject site. It's showing the context, the local context, and the existing conditions surrounding the subject site. As you see, and I'm going to use the little spotter, the subject site is surrounded by auto dealership, auto repair shop, a tire shop, and a used car storage. So the subject site is predominantly in a commercial area, and it will not act as an intrusion to the area. This is the existing zoning, showing the site as C2. C2 is also to the north, south, and east of the subject site. To the west, there is Res 1. I'm sorry, AR, Agricultural Residential. And this is the existing future land use, showing the site as Res 1. Res 1 is also to the north, west, south, and east, with this parcel over here, which is a tire shop, as COM. And this is the proposed future land use map showing the conflu on the site. This conflu will align with the existing zoning, and it is a compatible transitional land use to the surrounding uses. Planning and Development found the proposed amendment to be consistent with the following comprehensive plan policies. Policy Flu 8.1.5, North Market Area Establishment. Policy Flu 1.5.2, Conflicts in Zoning. So this policy says that the county shall address conflict zonings and shall review existing zonings and their consistencies and inconsistencies with the comprehensive plan. The subject site was zoned C2 in 1976. However, in 1989, when the comprehensive plan was adopted, the flu designation on the site was established as COM, or as Res 1, creating a conflict between the land use and the zoning. What the applicant is here today is pretty much clean up that conflict zoning and conflict between land use and zoning. Policy Flu 1.6.2, location of commercial development, and Policy Flu 1.6.4, neighborhood commercial uses, pretty much go hand in hand, and the proposed amendment is consistent with them since the subject site meets the locational criteria. The subject site is not located within, internally within a residential neighborhood. It is actually of Shady Hills Road, which is a collector vision road, I must add, and Bosley Drive is also a collector vision road. Policy Flu 1.6.3, transitional land uses. Policy Flu 1.8.7, economic development. So generally speaking, Flu has a much more economic and fiscal impact to the county than residential uses. And this proposed amendment will generate more revenues to the county than the existing residential use. Then we have Policy Flu 2.3.1, rural character areas. The subject site is located in a rural area. However, the proposed development will not cause any intrusion. It will not add any more intensities. What the applicant is trying to do today is pretty much use the commercial entitlements that were set forth in the zoning in 1976. In conclusion, Planning and Development recommends the LPA to find the proposed amendment consistent with the comprehensive plan and recommend approval to the Board of County Commissioners.
Very good.
Any questions?
Questions? Anything? No? guess-
The applicant is present if anybody has more questions.
So would the applicant like to speak? And is there anybody here to speak in opposition? Okay, if you want to come forward, or you want to wait till you hear the opposition?
Applicant wants to speak, yeah.
If you give us your name and your address, please.
Yes, sir. My name is Marlo Johnson. I actually live at 15914 Only Lane, where the proposed land bumps right up to my property. I mean, I printed up some pictures. I'm not sure if I need to give them to you. It shows the community. She stated that it was predominantly commercial. That is not true. And that's why I printed the picture, so you guys get an idea. There is residents all around me.
So, excuse me, are you speaking for the applicant or for your?
I'm speaking for myself as opposed to, you said anybody want to oppose, and I raised my
Yeah,
hand.
I was wanting to ask the applicant, is there an applicant here? Did you want to speak, or you want to wait to hear what the objection is? Huh? Okay, go ahead then.
Okay. So, sorry, going forward, I am, as you can see on the pictures, that I am bumped up directly to them. When they were installing the fence, I spoke to the son. He made a statement in regards to that they were going to park trucks on the property. That property's been agriculture since I've been there, since 2003. Okay, again, it's a small community. There is the marathon down the road, and there's a gas station. You do have a repair shop across the street. He's been there for a long time also. And then you have a very small, I wouldn't call it a dealership, but it's there regardless. My concern is a few things. How does this benefit the community? At what point does it doesn't create jobs? It creates an eyesore. There's also a picture in there across the street that has semis parked there, which is what the ideal is for that piece of property from what the son stated. There's trash, broken down trucks down there. The residents of only around 2005 paid for the road to be paved. It was dirt when I first moved there. The issue is they were doing a survey. I'm assuming that they're trying to expand the road maybe. My concern is who's gonna pay for that? Who's gonna maintain it? Along Shady Hills Road, the entrance is on Only Lane. It's not on Shady Hills Road. And the pictures will also show you how narrow our road is. And the heavy machinery going in and out of it is not going to be able to sustain that. To include the turning off of Shady Hills Road is very narrow and full of sand. We're concerned about the noise. We're concerned about whether they'll be sleeping overnight, the trucks are gonna be running, how it affects my property, my taxes. Who's gonna pay for the expansion? Who's gonna pay for the maintenance on the roads? The oil, the diesel seeping into the soil, affecting the water, because we all have well. I mean, it's on and on. It goes, I look right out my kitchen window and see the property. I mean, think about how you would feel if you had to live next to that. It is majority's community. I'm not sure. Bosley has something like that only because it is 2 lanes. Only is just a street. Even expansion is not gonna give it enough room to come on that incline up on our road to swing off of Mariner, off Shady Hills Road. So, with that being said, I want you to take into consideration, I understand it's beneficial to them, but I don't know how it's better for the community. As you can see, it's all sand, because the only one it benefits is the person who bought the property, who's gonna lease it out. Also, there's already a sign up there that says lease property. Kind of presumptuous, if you ask me. But I don't know who else is here from the community. I just know that I had to say my piece because I'm bumped right up to him.
Did you, when you acquired your property, did you know that was Zone C2 commercial?
No, sir.
Didn't check?
No, well, I'm sure it's in my paperwork. I've been there since 2003, so I'm getting older. I probably noticed during the sale, but not,
Evidently it's been Zone C commercial since 1976.
okay.
So that
So then why are we
shouldn't
here
be a problem
rezoning
here.
if it's been already
We're
commercial?
not rezoning it, we're combining the future land use and the zoning. Because back when we had zoning, there was no future land use. didn't have it back then.
Right, it was just.
So now there's a
it was just woods.
conflict, we're trying to resolve the conflict. So, but if you had checked when you bought the property, you'd see that it was zone commercial. That's my only concern.
Well, and I appreciate your concern, sir, but you have to understand my concern also
Yeah.
being there so long. The last thing I'm gonna do is look out my kitchen window and see that.
Right. Okay.
Did you have something, Mr.
Yeah,
Hanson?
I just had a question. The picture looks like you're showing the fence on the piece of property that's at the corner of Olney and Shady Hills Road. Is that-
That's their property, they fenced all that, and I'm showing that corner, that property to the right is their property that they fenced off. That corner comes going north up Shady Hills Road, turning onto Olney Lane, and I just wanted to show that corner, how that sanded.
Isn't the property we're talking about today 600 feet south of that corner?
That whole property is
That
theirs.
parcel is not the parcel we're here talking about today.
That,
We're talking about the next parcel to the south. Can you go back, can somebody go back to the map that shows the
yeah, that
the
piece of
parcels?
property, sir, is fenced, the whole 4.5, 5 acres, they fenced it all.
When was it
It's all
fenced?
wooded. It's all wooded. I'm not sure if they want to put it in the corner of that big old property, but it's all fenced in as one.
How recent is the fence?
2 months, maybe a month?
Okay, so we'll send code enforcement up there to take a look at the chain link fence on the arterial roadway?
Yes, we can.
Okay.
I just had one question. When
Yes,
you
sir.
use the term bumped up, does that mean your property is,
Yes, there's a picture, sir, that'll show
There's
you the
distance
fence in my
between your-
driveway.
let me get the correct word out loud. Do you share a property line with that property?
I do.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Again, I'll go back to my question. The parcel that's on the corner of Olney and Shady Hills Road is not the parcel we're talking about today. The parcel we're talking about today is south of that, in the blue with the black square around it, or outline around it.
It's on Shady Hills Road and only, is that not correct? Oh, it's the one down lower.
South. It's the next one to the south.
Okay.
That's why I don't, the 4.4 acre, or 4.36 acre parcel you're talking about, I don't know that that's the one we're even here talking about today.
I don't know, I got the letter about it being rezoned, then there's a sign on the thing saying leases for the lease,
Yeah,
to
no,
lease the own property, so.
This is not at the corner of Olney. This is south.
To the south of
Yeah.
the
Is
corner.
that
Okay, so it's
property
the
at
other
the
parcel
corner
he
being
owns.
used?
Okay, I know he owns multiple, that's why I was here.
It's the one right next to the car lot there.
So therefore, you don't have a property,
Right, then I wouldn't have a property bumped right up to it, it would be on only in the corner of that.
Right.
Okay, thank you for
Okay.
hearing me, appreciate it.
Sure, thank you.
Thanks for clearing that up. Amy?
I don't think it's different owners.
Okay.
Planning Commission, the applicant would like to speak.
Okay.
Hi.
Hi.
Oh,
Need
sorry.
your name and address, please?
Excuse me?
Your name and address?
Oh, my name is Sarah Botero, and my address?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, 6530 Spanish Mill Circle.
Okay. thank
I'm the
you.
applicant's daughter.
Okay.
Oh, okay, so, just to like conclude it, we're just trying to clean up the conflict between, the land use and the zoning so we can use the site for commercial. And we want to follow the rules and resolve the conflict from residential to commercial. And we have been paying the taxes for the land that is currently not being put to use, knowing we bought it as commercial and it being residential. This land will produce more employment for the community and will follow the rules, as well as it was being shown. That was not our property that was being shown, and those are not our intentions with our property. There's already commercial properties in that zone, so it would not be an intrusion to the zoning of the place.
What are you planning to do with the property?
Oh, we're just planning to, like, my dad just, like, park his truck there.
What kind
And
of
have it.
trucks?
It's a Ford, what kind of truck? Yeah. It's an 18-wheeler truck
And used for what purpose?
for storage.
Ma'am, if you're gonna speak, you need to come to the mic.
She doesn't have a voice.
Well, can you give her name and address for her, please?
Her name is Paula Londono Botero. Her address is 6530 Spanish Mill Circle.
So are you gonna repeat everything she says, or? I'm just, because the clerk needs to pick up what the testimony is.
Yeah, so just say out loud what she's telling you.
This is your dad has a trucking company that we just want to storage.
Yeah, so my dad has a truck company, Pipes Trucking, and we're just going to use that property to have his truck as storage.
What kind of trucks?
An 18-wheeler.
For the purpose of?
The purpose of our company, my dad's company, he uses the 18-wheeler to transport things for work. So we would just use that property to.
Things do we transport?
It's a drive-in. We transport dry goods,
Dry goods, food, water, to companies.
Okay.
Stuff.
So it's not a sand hauling truck, it's a truck that brings stuff.
Is there going to
like
be an office on the
Publix or
property?
someplace like that.
Like a box truck.
Yeah, it's a box truck. In an office, we're just going to have a shell, ¿cómo se dice? Place to put the trucks and wash the trucks.
Yeah, no, there would not be an office.
Yeah, so like a covered
Yeah, it would just be a
area.
cover place to wash the truck and keep stuff there
Yeah.
to fix the truck and stuff. Yeah. All right, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
I'm sorry about that.
No, that's fine. Is there someone else back there that had their hand up? Yeah.
Well, just so we're clear, if you're gonna get more opposition, you're gonna have to give them another chance to rebuttal.
That's fine.
Okay.
Yeah. That's why I was trying to get the opposition up here first.
Okay.
Jen Kerouac, 15925 Green Glen Lane, Shady Hills, Florida. I am just coming in concern. Definitely understand that the applicant needs to be able to utilize their property as they intended when they purchased it. But again, the concern is that, the conversation regarding Shady Hills Road keeps coming up. It's going to keep coming up because, the more commercial use without, and again, it seems to be from my perspective, and I may not know everything, okay, but, the planning for the north to south from County Line to 52 with regards to the capacity of the road, and the things keep coming in, and we don't know. Today, it could be her dad's, semi hauling 53-foot trailer, and tomorrow he could bring on other trucks. We don't know. And there's already an excessive amount of traffic without, there's minimal traffic lights. There's honestly minimal street lights. There's a lot of infrastructure concerns that I believe need to be addressed prior to continuing to agree to the rezoning, planning, future land use for each and every spot on Shady Hills Road. And I mean, I have a video. I apologize. I was here I was tardy today. I apologize for that. But just yesterday, I had a guy who came and I helped him get to a rehab facility, thankfully. He was hit by a bike. He was on his bike and he was hit by a car and the car took off. And these are the people that are ending up at our church. We're doing our best to help. The community needs assistance. I'm hopeful. We've requested planning and development to attend our meeting next Thursday, and so that is, I'm hopeful for that, and I'm hopeful that we can start, again, I'm here to positively collaborate on behalf of our community. It is a very serious issue. We just got the FHP report for, I believe it was 2022. There were nearly 500 accidents, and then that's along with the Pasco County report, which is separate from FHP, that was 468. So, again, we're just trying to appeal to you as you continue to plan. This is still lacking, and it's my understanding that still within the next 10 years, there is no plans currently for the road.
Okay, thank you for coming.
Denise, question just logistically, and I don't know if you're the right person to ask this or not, but I guess, obviously, what we're here today is to clean up conflict land use. What triggered that? I mean, is this use required, are they required to submit a site plan? And when I went to submit a site plan, it came up that there was a conflict land use?
Yes, absolutely. That's what would typically trigger something like this. Someone comes in, asks a question, I want to develop my property. It's looked at, there was a rezoning in 1976, was rezoned from AR to C2, and it's got a land use that is not COM or ROR or those type of land uses, and we basically say there's conflict zoning, it needs to be resolved. They contact long-range planning, and that's why we're here. So this will require a site plan. Development activity requires a site plan, so they'll have to come through the site plan process. Hopefully, they've already scheduled a pre-application meeting or gone through that process to talk about the development.
That was the reason for my line of questioning. Denise and I are looking at each other because I just had a similar situation wherein I've submitted a site plan where trucks will be stored, but they're associated with a contracting operation. I'm not sure what was described by the applicant is actually going to be an allowed C2 use. So I will say, one, I personally support the resolution of the conflict zoning, and I've been here jumping up and down and beating my chest on behalf of the people out there in Shady Hills about resolving these conflict zonings, because when they do come in to get site plans, they will be required to do things like analyze substandard roadways, construct sidewalks along the frontages of the properties, and these are all the things that you've been here complaining that aren't happening in Shady Hills. So this will be the catalyst to start that process. Unfortunately, what I'm hearing from the description of the applicant to their business, I'm not sure that's an allowed C2 use. That'll get determined by Ms. Hernandez during the site plan process, but probably ought to go have a pre-application meeting with her sooner than later, or you may end up with disappointing news about what your plans are for the property.
Yes, and for the record, I'm shaking my head up and down saying yes, that all this needs to occur.
Can I ask a related question?
Yes, of course, David.
Is C3 allowed in COM? And would this be a permitted, is what they described, would it be a permitted C3 use?
I believe that use is specifically described in I-1.
Okay, so it's not even a permitted C3 use?
Correct, yes.
We just literally went through this with Denise last week on a project.
Yes, deja vu, yes.
So, I guess the question is, I mean, are they, because they're going through this effort to get it to be calm, which does clean up the conflict, but it may not even allow what they're wanting to do?
Yes, if the company is a trucking company, that is an I-1 light industrial park district use. If the use is basically that it is a self-storage facility for those type of vehicles, then that would be under C2, subject to conformance with LDC 1105.
What flue would I-1 fall under?
I-1 would fall under IL.
So the COM wouldn't get them what they want to do, if depending on what they're trying to do there.
That's
So you're
accurate.
saying, am I understanding that they can't even park their personal truck on that property? They're not, because from what I can understand, they're not talking about, it's not a commercial enterprise and where they're storing other people's trucks. They just want to park their own truck.
If it falls under the definition of commercial vehicle storage, then that would, that's a permitted use in C2, subject to compliance with section 1105, which is self-storage standards.
So then there is a scenario where they could get, depending on what they're doing,
there is a
they
scenario.
can make it a C2
yes.
use.
That's why we would certainly love to have
The pre-app.
a pre-app meeting as quickly as possible.
Okay.
But I will tell you, just my own personal experience, I have a client who has C2 property on US 19 with an ROR flu, and they parked their personal box truck on the property and were rewarded with a code enforcement citation for doing so. So no, the answer is you can't just park your personal truck on the property, or at least that doesn't appear to be.
Or at least not an ROR, but maybe a C2.
Well, no, it was C2 zone.
Oh, okay, I
C2
got you.
ROR flu, right on US 19.
So and the applicant can state this, but I'm hearing from the team that the applicant also has an idea of doing a vehicle dealership at that location, which that would be a C2 use, of course, subject also to development standards as stated in the Land Development Code. So that would be a C2 use.
I mean, regardless, it's kind of moot. We're just trying to clear up the conflict
Yeah,
at this point.
that's right.
Sounds
Yes,
like they need to have.
which I am all for doing, and I
right.
would be all for staff initiating
The pre-app.
the correction of the conflicts on all of the other surrounding ones, as I've been saying.
And for what it's worth, to explain to, I don't see her, the young lady that was talking about the growth in Shady Hills, and, you know, Shady Hills, when the comp plan came out in 1989, Shady Hills was a much smaller traveled road. There was a lot less traffic there and a lot less growth in the area, and obviously even less so in 1976 when the zoning happened. So, you know, unfortunately, we have to kind of evolve with the times, and commercial seems to make a whole lot more sense along the high-trafficked area of Shady Hills as the area continues to grow. And some of that development is what's going to generate the revenues to be able to make these improvements that
That's
you're
why I
talking
said,
about.
this is the catalyst as people, as these conflicts are resolved.
Right.
And then they have to go through the site plan approval process. These are the catalysts that then become the requirement to construct sidewalks, to fix deficient roads. These are the things that the group from Shady Hills that's been in here 3 or 4 times now, that they've been voicing their concerns about. These are the things that are gonna start the ball rolling to get this fixed. I'd love to see all of these conflicts resolved. If Hyatt could go back to the map that showed all of the other conflict zonings right here in the block, well, now we have the makings of a little village center.
Right.
We can't have the sidewalks and the street lights and.
I think we're all on the same page with trying to fix some of those problems, you know, but that's the way we do it.
Okay, is there
So-
anyone else to speak?
Mr. Chair, I'm not sure we
Yeah.
gave the applicants rebuttal again. I don't know if they wanted to provide any additional rebuttal or not.
Did you want to come up and speak again and respond to the last person?
Okay, what if we decide to not use the land as we are talking right now?
Okay, so from like all the, what we've been like hearing and like, you know, learning about too, because we didn't know any of like these issues or anything, would it be possible, like if we decided obviously not to like park the trucks there, since as I'm hearing that even if this does get approved, it might not even be allowed under C2. If we just decided to do like the dealership, which I've heard that is allowed.
That's something you can work through with Denise's team to kind of figure out what's allowed and what's not allowed
Okay,
through that. So absolutely, they'll help you with that.
okay,
Okay, all right, that's it.
all right, thank
Okay.
you.
We do have your email address, and then what I'll send you is all the instructions on how to submit for a pre-application meeting, so we could discuss the matter. Thank you.
All right, any other questions, comments from the public?
Now, Mr.
Okay,
Chair, I make a
questions
motion
up
to
here?
approve.
I'll second that.
Have a motion and a second, any further discussion?
Roll call.
Got me.
Mr. Jamie Girardi?
Aye.
Mr. Derek Conklin?
Aye.
Mr. Peter Hansel?
Aye.
Mr. John Moody?
Aye.
Mr. Christopher Poole?
Aye.
Mr. Chris Williams?
Aye.
And Chairman Charles Gray.
Aye. Thanks. Okay,
Next.
Next on the hit parade.
Next item is APC 17.
Okay.
Good afternoon, Robert Irving, Planning and Development. So this is item PC 17, which is CPAS 2304 Bayonet Gardens. And this is a small-scale comprehensive plan amendment in the name of PDD 230335. Here's the site location. This is located within the West Market area, within the urban concentration area. It's kind of on that one bend that US 19 has for the northern part, within Commission District 5. The proposal is to change the future land use from Res 6, residential 6 dwelling units per gross acre, to Res 24. The purpose is for a multifamily development with 50% of those proposed units being affordable. And this is located on the west side of Lakeshore Boulevard. And this will have a sub-area policy, which I'll get into with these next slides, which will be 7.1.73 Bayonet Gardens. So here's the site location, and there's just a few things I want to touch on that I think are important in establishing a background on this parcel. This parcel is within the coastal high hazard area. There is also an AE flood zone and an archaeological site. There's a Category 2 wetland on the southern part, kind of where that lake is. Excuse my shaky hands. And I want to briefly kind of mention the sub-area here. The intention behind the sub-area is to require that 50% of the proposed units in this development are affordable housing. And I'll touch on it further, but the zoning currently allows more than the future land use would. The zoning right now is MF1. So the idea behind the sub-area is if 50% of the proposed units, like I mentioned, are affordable, then they can get the full Res 24 density. But if they are not, affordable units are not proposed, then this would be subject to Res 12, which would be in conformance with the current zoning. So here's a context map to kind of just provide some idea as to where this is. I think it's important to note that there's 2 transit stops about 700 feet northeast of this project. And the 5A road trail is currently out for bid, I believe, with purchasing. And by the end of July, within 420 days, it'll be constructed. Now, the reason why I feel like that's important to note here is with 50% of the units being affordable, these residents may not have access to vehicles, and by being able to utilize the public transportation and the trail, they'll be able to access a wide variety area within the county. Here's the existing future land use, which is the existing future land use is Res 6, and to the north it's ROR, Res 6, and Res 24. Actually, about a year ago, that parcel directly north was approved for the exact same kind of proposal. To the east is Res 6, to the south is Res 6, and to the west is Res 6 as well. Here's the proposed future land use, and then here's the zoning. So the zoning is currently MF1, and to the north, the zoning is PUD, MF3, and MF2. To the east, the zoning is PUD and PO2. To the south, it's AC, PUD, and MF1. And to the west, it's MF2 and MF1. Now, also just to provide a little bit of background with the zoning, in 1978, this parcel was rezoned from AC to a PUD to allow for a multifamily development. And then in 2006, this parcel was again rezoned to MF1 to allow for a multifamily townhome development, with the caveat that it was capped at 173 dwelling units. The applicant also has already gone through a pre-application to rezone to MF3, but it has not been filed yet. I just want that to be noted. So the following policies, the proposed amendment is consistent with the following comprehensive plan policies. Policy HSG 1.1.2, comprehensive plan amendments. Policy Flu 8.1.1, West Market Area Establishment. Policy Flu 9.1.7, Urban Service Area. Policy Flu 1.6.3, Transitional Land Uses. Policy HSG 2.1.1, State and Federal Housing Programs. And just to touch on some of that, this project is consistent with the surrounding area, considering that the surrounding area is all medical offices, and the hospital is a big portion of this that should be mentioned. In 2021, there was a study done by the Tampa Bay Regional Planning Council, and this area specifically was noted as an activity node. And with the expansion, which is, I believe, currently occurring for the hospital, there's going to be about 200 new jobs added, and this housing will be, those jobs will be met with this housing opportunity if this is approved. And what else did I want to cover here? I think it's also just important to note how consistent this is with the West Market area establishment, because the vision of the West Market area specifically speaks to the inventory of affordable housing, and this will provide a big increase in the county for affordable housing. And it also within the West Market area, approximately 60 or 70% of the population is at low or moderate income levels. That was in that study that I mentioned earlier that was identified. So it's especially needed in this area, and it will help support those individuals with that income level. And this comes that you, or Planning and Development Department recommends that you find the proposed amendment consistent with the comprehensive plan and recommend approval to the Board of County Commissioners.
All right.
I'm available if you
questions?
have any questions.
Are there any concepts for how many units they're proposing on this?
I believe when I last spoke to the applicant, who I can attest to it better than I can, was 360 units. You can correct me if I'm wrong, but.
Okay.
And only 50% of those will be affordable?
Correct.
Okay, any other questions for now?
What definition of affordable is that? The
So we were
workforce
using
affordable?
120% or below of the area median income.
And what is that number?
I don't know that personally off the top of my head. I can find that out for you.
Yeah, we'd like to know that.
Okay.
Okay. All right.
Any other questions?
The applicant's present?
So the effective density is 18 units per acre.
Says the applicant present.
Yeah. he is present.
Okay. Is anyone here to object or to speak against it? Okay.
Thank you, Shelley Johnson, 6400 Madison Street, and I have been sworn. I'll just save my comments to answer questions.
Okay.
So,
Well, Shelley, can you answer the question about what is 120% of AMI?
so medium, it's probably about 50. I didn't look it up, but it's around $55,000-$60,000 is median income in Pasco County right now. So what they do for workforce affordable housing, which is different than low-income housing, it's 120% to, it's either median income, which is that number I gave you, or 120% below that,
How many people?
50% on this property.
No. Is that
That's the
family
house,
of
it's the
3,
household.
4,
I believe it's
5?
the household income.
Yeah, it's per household, it's average median income, yeah, that's the AMI, yeah.
I have the answer because I looked it up.
There you go.
So, and this is coming from Pasco County. The number of persons in household, 120% AMI is set for a one-person household is 73,080. For a two-person household is 83,520. For a three-person household is 93,960. And for a four-person household is 104,280.
So it's workforce affordable. It's the same language that's used in the Senate Bill 102, I think.
It is.
But this doesn't fall into that purview because this is already zoned residential, correct?
It doesn't fall into the land use preemption under Senate Bill 102, but it might qualify for some of the tax incentives under Senate Bill 102.
Interesting.
My guess is they probably will attempt to qualify for the
The
tax.
numbers you were reading, Denise, that was the value, 120% of, it started at 73,000.
Yeah,
for-
it's maximum area median income, taking into consideration 120% AMI moderate, is 73,080 for a one-person household. So it starts at 30%, which is extremely low, and these are numbers that are put together in the down payment assistance program with community development. So at 30% is 18,250 for a one-person household. For a one-person household at 120 AMI, which is considered moderate, is 73,080, and then goes up based on the number of people.
Okay. Any other questions before we hear from the audience? Okay, sir, would you like to come up? Can you give us your name and address, please?
My name is John Burkett. I live at 8052 Woodbrook Court, Hudson, Florida, 34667. I am also the president of the HOA for Lakeside Woodlands, which is adjacent to this property. And naturally, my residents have some concerns. I had a couple questions answered already by the plaintiff's attorney. It's to my understanding that there'll be no low-income
Right.
residents?
This is different than low-income housing.
Okay. Because I see on the slide there, it's state and federal. I'm just trying to protect my community. We already have a subdivision going across the street, Evergreen Fields. My other question is.
Sir, I just want to be clear with you, though, that I think their target demographic is workforce, but I don't know that they can prohibit somebody who's making less than that from renting the unit.
Well, I understand that.
Okay.
I'm just trying to protect the value of the property as a whole. I got the answer on Res 6, Res 24. Thank you very much. And it's my understanding this is adjacent to our community from Lily Pad to our Pavilion Park, which would be at the corner of Lake Shore and the two Lake Shores, actually. Which, the pond that was mentioned before, that lake is part of our community. I got an answer to one other question, and that was, would there be a buffer? And I was assured there's a 30 to 35-foot natural buffer. That would be great, because we do have a lot of wildlife in there. Has anybody surveyed or studied the impact on the wildlife?
Yeah, we'll get answers for these when they come back up.
Okay. And naturally, traffic. 5A Road is one lane both ways, soft shoulder. We have 338 houses going across the street. My development is 335. And now you want to put another 300 plus. Is there any plan to eliminate the traffic?
Okay.
I'm just asking.
Yeah, well, when they come back up,
Okay.
she's making a note, I hope, of your
And
questions.
Now, the water source for the landscape needs on this project, would it be wells, reclaim? Because we are a well-known sinkhole area, as the county can attest, because they're about to turn over 6 lots that they demolished for us and filled. And it can never be built on again. Estates is notorious for it. Everyone in our area is notorious for sinkholes. I live in a sinkhole repaired house. I don't worry about it because it sits on 36 steel I-beams, and all I need is a ladder to get in. Okay? I would like to know about the water source for that, and mainly the traffic, the wildlife, and any negative effect on my community.
Okay.
Okay?
Very good. Thank you for
your
coming.
time.
Appreciate it. We'll see if we can get you some answers. Who's next from the community?
I'm Sarah Mackenzie Reap, and I live at 7504 Cypress Knee Drive in Lakeside Woodlands.
Okay.
I've been a resident there since, well, for about 26 years. And my concerns, some of them which were answered, but the gentleman spoke of something I wasn't aware of, the 5A trail. I haven't heard of that. I have no idea. I know there's Starkey trails, but I'm a little concerned. How does this affect Lakeside Woodlands? Is there going to be something cutting through that's adjacent to us that we aren't aware of, or running through or by our neighborhood? I watched the whole meeting yesterday with the Senate Bill 102 and the tax thing, and that was one of my questions relating to this development. Is that going to be something that is going to be among one of these 3 others that are already going in our county? And because, it's not just about my neighborhood, it's about my county in general. And is this going to be something else that we need to worry about? They mentioned 360 units. I'm not familiar on how this affordable income differs from low income. I am concerned about, with the median income, how many units are going to be fit for 4 individuals, 2 individuals? How is that going to relate to, from what I had originally read, there were going to be houses as well. Is this just strictly apartments, condos? Is there going to be something that our lake, which will be behind them or beside them, is that, we pay in our HOAs and stuff to have that lake maintained? Is this going to be something that they're going to have access to as well? And as previously mentioned, there is quite a bit of wildlife in that lake. And being part of a association that is full of the sinkholes, I too am concerned about the water, the aquifer. How are these things going to be affected? Having lived there a long time, I want to look out for my best interests as well in my property values. So I am very concerned about what's going in there. And I thank you for your time.
Thank you for coming. Yeah, those are very reasonable questions.
Thank you.
Was there anybody else? If not, Shelley, you want to come up and address some of those concerns?
Yeah, to address the utilities, it's central water and sewer. So, there's connections, and when they engineer it, it's not going to be on a well or septic. The water body to the south is actually a Class 2 wetland, so we'll be doing whatever buffering is required from that in addition to the perimeter buffering under the code. As far as traffic, this is, the comp plan level. The needs assessment did not trip any levels of service. There was nothing that showed there was going to be any issues with this proposal, but, obviously when we get into the site plan, and engineering, we'll dig down a little bit more into traffic, and if there's improvements or substandard road issues or something that get flagged at that point, we'll deal with it, but we're not seeing any of that at this time, so.
Are there any plans to impact the wetland, or is it gonna be completely buffered and left alone?
Yeah, we're gonna buffer it. I don't think we're impacting or doing mitigation, no. It's
Okay.
we're gonna buffer from it. That's what, when he had asked me that question, that's what I was explaining to him, that there's a little bit additional buffering because we are dealing with a wetland, so.
Okay.
Let me ask a quick question.
Sure.
They indicated that their HOA, well, she didn't mention the HOA, so I don't know if that's a factor or not. She indicated that they pay for a portion of that lake to be maintained. And you can see the property, I can see. That's where I'm going at. How are you gonna do that? It's kind of like you got a piece of the property.
Well, I don't necessarily know that there's any pay, it's a Class 2 wetland, so I don't know that HOA, it's under SWIFMA jurisdiction. I know that, I'd have to look at it, but we're gonna have whatever maintenance obligations we have for the portion of it that's on our property is what we'll obviously have to take care of, but if we're not impacting it, it's just gonna be a buffer for us.
Yeah, I'm just curious about that because in the
Yeah.
community I live in, we have a territorial dispute sometime regarding the cleaning of certain lakes, so
Yeah, no, I don't think that would be an issue with
I
this.
don't think it's gonna be an issue, but
Yeah.
it could arise.
And I think there was another question about access. We don't, we're not planning any access through Lakeshore, through that PUD. It's, separate access, so we abut Lakeshore Boulevard and Dallas Drive is what this property sits in between.
And it's all multifamily, there's no single family.
Yeah, it's all multifamily. It's already zoned for multifamily. And then again, like Robert mentioned, the property immediately to the north, which is a different developer, has, I think a year and a half ago, came in and did a Res 24, similar to what we're doing. I think that's a workforce housing development as well, so.
Yeah, well, I think they're concerned mainly about the quality of the development.
Yeah.
And the type of people that'll be living there, obviously.
Yeah.
So that's why they're asking about the income level, where you're not talking about Section 8.
No, these aren't voucher, and it's 50%,
That's the first thing
yeah,
that
it's
comes to
median.
people's minds, so.
It's
I
medium
think
to
it's
moderate.
good to try to clear that up.
I do too, because I think it's confusing.
Yeah.
And when I was surprised when I asked Denise about the numbers, because in the staff report, it talks about, well, this is located next to transit stops, and then talks about the benefit of the trail, and that the people that will live here necessarily can't afford transportation, and that'll make their housing more affordable. And I'm trying to figure out how someone who makes $73,000 in a single-person household doesn't have a car. Because they probably don't make $73,000 without that car, but
Yes, most likely won't be as.
So can you illuminate on that?
Yeah, I mean, it's not low income, it's not public housing, and I think as Denise said, it's, you're talking about median income starting at 73 and above. Right now, we're looking at rents in the county that are $2,000 and $3,000. I know my son's a firefighter, he can't afford to rent in this county right now, and he makes a good income, he works for Hillsborough, so, I think what they're trying to get at is there's going to be a lot of healthcare workers. There is a lot of healthcare workers that are in this median income range, and really this development is going to be there to serve them. It's really going to be so the immediate area, so they can just get on transit. They can save money not having to have a car and insurance. I mean, it's just all that idea of the public facilities are there.
The fact that when when he brought up the fact that there's transit locations there, there are a number of people who still are in the workforce. I can't use a lot of people because I don't. They tend to go have their own vehicle, and then they use transportation such as the bus system. And I know Pasco County tries to encourage people to use it, and I think they do a very good job in trying to encourage people to use it. But people will use it. If I have a bus stop that's real close to me, and I can use it, and I know the next bus stop is going to be close to where I work at, and there's a schedule that works into my work schedule, I think people will use that, and they'll use their private vehicle for when they want to do leisure driving, not going to and from work. So I think that's one of the things that I saw when they brought up the transit stops there as being a positive. But also in the back of my mind too went the fact that what some of the other folks have said, and people on the board have indicated, that it might be for those that have a less than a good income, and therefore they must use transportation. But
Right, so a lot of it's tied to the funding. I mean, 50% of it, so I think David pointed out, you could have somebody that makes way less and they could give a false credit report and they could end up renting in there, and obviously at some point they probably aren't going to be able to afford it and they're going to get evicted. But in order for us to keep the rents at levels that are affordable for somebody making $73,000 or somebody working at the hospital, you have to get the funding in place to do that. In order to get the funding in place to do that, you have to be able to show them that all these public facilities and all this infrastructure is there. Which plays right into what Robert was saying, that this area, this market area, that's what it's telling everybody to do. The density's there, the infrastructure's there, get the housing in there that people can afford that are working in the hospital and things of that nature. And this just allows us to keep that rent level down.
Shelley, I'm sorry, I'm a little slow on this. I need to back up. I need to take a second to think about this. So what this is saying is 50% of the units are going to be at a reduced price for people that make up to 120% AMI?
Correct.
So it could be somebody that makes $20,000 a year that's going to pay a lower rent than somebody that makes more than 120% AMI.
Yes, so
Right?
it's medium income. So we have to guarantee, which is what we're doing through this sub-area policy, that we are going to serve 50%. 50% of the units are going to be at either median income, which is $73,000, or 120% less than that. So you can go to 140. I think, we just chose 120 because it's more reasonable for this area, but that's what it's for. The rest of it can be rented to whoever qualifies, just like a regular rental.
Rent is, I'm trying to not use the word cap, but for lack of a better word, the rent is capped at 30% of 120% AMI.
It helps keep the rental rate down, yeah.
They say it's affordable if the renter is not paying more than 30% of their income. So for a single-person household, 30% of $73,000 is what the rent is for.
Right, and we're guaranteeing we're going to offer that for at least 50% of these units in order to try to fill that a huge affordable housing gap. I mean, I know you guys probably hear about it all the time. It's a problem in Pasco right now, so.
Yeah, that's still $1,700 a month, give or take.
It's a good amount of money.
It's not peanuts.
Yeah, no.
So, can I ask a question, or?
Yeah, do it, David.
So Shelley, I saw that community development was supporting the application, but I couldn't tell whether you were actually getting funding from community development or not.
So they are working on the funding right now. They had made an effort to get some funding for a different type of development on this property. It wasn't one of the ones chosen, but they are talking, there's no funding in place right now. That's probably the short answer. They're working on it, so. But
So
no
I guess my
community development
question is,
hasn't yet. There might be a tax credit deal, we don't know yet.
what's going to be the enforcement mechanism? I mean, I understand the comp plan saying that a minimum of 50% of the units shall be set aside for those with income at or below 120% of the area median income. What duration is that for, and how is it going to be enforced once the building permits have been issued? I mean, typically, when it's something funded through community development, there's some LURA or something that ensures that it's affordable for a period of time, and there's basically a land use restriction that addresses how this will be monitored and enforced. I can't tell whether that's happening here, or, I mean, there's a sub-area policy, but I can't tell how that's gonna be enforced after the fact.
it's built.
After it's built, especially if community development's not giving you any money. So,
After it's built, I'm
Robert, yeah, just state your name so we know who's
Robert from
talking.
Planning and Development. After it's built, I'm not exactly sure. I know the mechanism was supposed to be at the site plan level.
But, okay,
Well,
so
okay,
we're
but
10
Brad,
years.
okay, can tell you Brad's team does not enforce this either. Brad's team, they're gonna issue a site plan approval. They're not gonna monitor how the property's rented 10 years from now.
Right.
So my question is, what is gonna be the enforcement mechanism to make sure this takes place for the next 30 years?
So I think the enforcement mechanism is going to be through the funding. Because obviously, if it's a county grant, we'll have county agreements with community development, that, all of that language is in their standard forms with regards to auditing, all that kind of stuff.
If the county's funding it, I agree with you that they have requirements that ensure this happens. That's why I started my question with, is the county providing any funding?
We hope so. And I think my client is definitely pursuing those avenues with the county, but nothing has been finalized or determined at this point. I think this is, all kind of early in process. What they're trying to do is they're trying to get the property in a position where there's density there that they can offer this 50%. Otherwise, they're just going to do 172 unit, multifamily development, which is what it's approved for.
David,
So
if this were like a HUD loan, I have a client right now that's doing a HUD loan, and they're getting the opportunity to finance an apartment complex for 40 years. And so if they don't maintain the rents within the bracket that they're required, then they lose or they're in default of that financing. But you raise a good point. Let's say now the financing is paid off. Then and they sell the apartment complex, what mechanism is there that the next owner is required to do this to comply with the land use? Because the only enforcement mechanism in this particular case is that if you don't reserve 50% of the apartments for workforce housing, then your future land use is 12 dwelling units to the acre. Well, no one's going to come in and make them tear the units down.
Right.
Once they're built.
You already built it's 18 units an acre at that point.
Right.
I mean, my only suggestion would be, because, it's almost like, we don't want to put the cart before the horse. So my suggestion would be maybe when, they get to site plan or something, at that point, you can add a deed restriction or something of that nature. The sub-area is going to run with it right now, saying you've got to do one or the other.
So part of my concern is actually for your benefit.
Yeah.
Okay, because this is me embedded in the comp plan. And it says a minimum of 50% of the units shall be set aside for those with income at or below 120% of the area median income. If this is embedded in the comp plan, that's forever. Okay? Normally, community development only requires us for, say, 30 years. So are you really committing that you're going to do it forever? Because if you put it that way in the comp plan,
It runs with the land, so if it's developed that way, that's how it's going to have to be operated, yes.
and your client's willing to make this commitment forever, even though community development would normally make you do it more than 30 years.
Well, my client's talking. Can I
Okay.
step away one second?
I also wanted to state for the record that as Robert was doing his presentation, he did state that this is going to come in for a rezoning to MF3. So I think there could also be a deed restriction placed on, a voluntarily agreed upon deed restriction.
Yeah, I don't
within the
disagree with
MF3.
you that some of this can be dealt with in the rezoning. And maybe that will help deal with some of the ensuring affordability issue. My concern is by embedding this requirement in the comp plan, you're arguably committing to do it for eternity, or until somebody amends the comp plan.
which is exceeding, I'm not aware of community development ever requiring this affordability to be in place longer than 30 years under any state or federal financing mechanism. So I'm not sure why there isn't some duration in the comp plan, or it doesn't say for a duration set forth in whatever LURA we impose, but the way it's currently worded, I would argue that's for eternity.
Shelley Johnson again, 6400 Madison Street. I was just speaking with Robert and also the client, and I think there's an agreement to add a 30-year deadline in there, that it'll maintain on the property for 30 years and then it'll be released. And we can probably work through some language between here and BCC, I'm assuming.
Is that language through a deed restriction or through?
The sub-area pilot is almost like a deed restriction because it does run with the land, like David's saying, so, yeah.
Yeah, but I think the question is, and I don't know that you can answer that, is what's the mechanism to enforce that? Once the buildings are built and they are occupied, doesn't matter what it says in the comp plan. Now your use is there, you're grandfathered in, and
Well,
nobody can. Right now, the penalty for not providing 50% of affordable workforce housing is that your maximum development entitlement is 12 dwelling units to the acre. So I think the question is, what stops you from coming in saying, yep, I'm making 50% of these units affordable, I'm going to develop them at 24 units to the acre, and then you no longer keep them workforce housing? Well, we can't come make you tear down half the units.
So I think if we're in agreement that we can add a 30-year deadline, there, like you were saying, John, though, through the financing, that's really where all those enforcement mechanisms come, whether they're coming from
okay,
HUD or
but-
whether they're
but
coming from
Shelley,
community development.
You just said you're not sure you're going to get funding. So
Well, I think,
it's possible to do a LURA that is not tied to funding, or
yeah.
where it's still enforceable through the LURA, whether you're getting funds or not. But I don't know. I think you personally need to work on some of this language more with community development to figure out what they're willing to, how they're going to actually enforce this requirement after. I mean, I realize they're supporting the project.
Yeah.
But this language in and of itself is probably too stringent for your client, in my opinion, and in some regards, but also not stringent enough because it doesn't deal with how are we going to enforce, to Mr. Moody's point, what's the enforcement mechanism after the building's built? You know, what happens if somebody rents to somebody at 180% of median after you've already built the building? Well, then it's too late to reduce the density because you've already built it. So what is the remedy and who's going to enforce it?
The only thing I can say is just from all of my work I do with affordable housing and with the Housing Authority, through all these financing mechanisms, there's auditing requirements that go into play, whether it be the county or HUD. And so they really become the enforcement arm.
I don't disagree with
for
you
the rental.
when it's actually getting funding through the state and federal government.
Right.
I'm fully aware that of all the language that gets put into these documents when we're giving you money, because then if you breach, we ask for the money back, basically. Or there's a financial incentive to meet this requirement because you got to pay us back the money that we gave you if you don't do it. The issue will be that now that we have Senate Bill 102, you might do this and get no money from the county and just do it solely for the tax exemption. At which point, there won't be all these financing documents that you're talking about.
Well, if it's not developed as with the 50% affordable housing, which again, it gets all regulated through the financing documents, it's just going to be a 172-unit multifamily development at regular rents, whatever the market, bears. So it's going to be one or the two. If it ends up being a workforce housing development through those documents, that's where it's going to end up getting regulated in terms of the length, in terms of making sure they're meeting all those AMI requirements, because it's all going to be things that are going to be dealt with through audits.
But I haven't heard definitively that you're going to get money.
I think they're very hopeful, and they are, I think, on a positive path that they're going to get the money, the different avenues they're going through, but you know how complicated that financing is, so nothing's solid
I don't
at
disagree
this
with you,
point.
but my point is that because of Senate Bill 102, it's possible you could develop an affordable housing project,
Mhm.
50% of the units be set aside as affordable, and you do it solely for the tax exemption,
Mhm.
and not get any money from the county or the state, and at which point there won't be any financing documents to ensure affordability.
Or enforce it.
And then it
or
just
to
becomes
enforce
a,
it.
well, then it just becomes a regular, it's just a private development. These, McDowell, the owners that I work for, are affordable housing developers. That's what they do in the state of Florida. They've done affordable housing developments down in Miami, in different areas all over the state. That is what they do. They don't do anything other than that.
Everybody's questioning whether or not your client intends to develop it as workforce housing.
Right.
We're looking at what happens down the road. People build apartment complexes and then they sell them off to a REIT.
Right, so
Or they
this-
sell them off to another investor. That's what the
Right, and if
concern
it's
is
sold off
here, is
to a
when.
REIT, right, that
Mhm.
pays for it cash, that doesn't have any kind of financing contingency or anything, they can set the rent at whatever they want in theory, and now they have 360 units that's at all expensive rents, and they're making even more money.
No,
on
because
those
I think, I think the way the financing will be set up, they're gonna see this, this is all gonna be part of what they make their decision on, the
But if
sub-area
another
policy.
owner, if someone else steps in and buys that property
Yeah.
and pays cash for it, right?
Mhm.
Let's say you're someone saying, hey, I'm gonna make all these high-end apartments,
Yeah,
right?
no.
I'm gonna make a bunch of money on each unit, so now I'm at 24 units per acre. They can step in, pay cash for it, take the financing contingency out of the question, and now they can do whatever they want. There's no enforcement arm to say, hey, we shouldn't be at that density now, because they're already built.
I don't necessarily disagree with you, I mean, but this is how these
I
are.
don't know if I'm
these-
arguing with, I'm not really
Yeah.
arguing with you as the applicant, but I'm just kind of speaking about.
Well,
Yeah.
to be
What our
clear,
issue is in the
so I think
county.
there's a way to tackle this issue.
Yeah,
My point is that the way the sub-area policy is drafted currently, I don't think it adequately tackles the issue.
yeah, I hear what you're saying, I do.
Because it doesn't, you're saying, oh, this will all be enforced through the financing. True if there's financing,
That's true right now, right?
but, I understand that your client has done a lot of affordable housing projects. Senate Bill 102 is fairly new. This tax exemption is all new. So it's possible, as your client, he may actually want to do this with only based on a tax exemption. So if that's the case, we won't get these financing documents that you're talking about that ensure affordability. So there has to be some other mechanism to ensure that if we gave you all this additional density based on it being affordable, how are we going to guarantee that happens 10 years from now, 20 years from now when the property's sold?
David, are you implying that that can be fixed by rewriting the sub-area policy?
Yes,
or-
I think there's a way to craft this sub-area policy so that there's some commitment for Allura or some, and for a period of time, say 30 years, that will.
Is that something you can draft on the fly?
Well.
Or work out with Ms. Johnson
we
on
can
the
make-
fly?
The reason I
make a
cannot draft,
contingency of
the
it,
reason
but-
I cannot draft this on the fly is because I've been in conversations with the Community Development Department indirectly, and I'm not sure they're willing to enforce this requirement if they're not getting state or federal funds. That's the issue. So it's not just a legal drafting issue. There's also a who's going to enforce issue. And I don't have firm confirmation that community development is going to enforce this issue on a project for which they're not providing financing. So I can't, the answer to the question is yes, legally I could draft something. I don't know that it's something that our community development department is willing to enforce.
I understand. The reason for the question, and I'm not trying to force you into a legal decision on the spot, is I'm trying to figure out if a continuance is appropriate, because it's a land use decision. It's not one we condition.
Right. You don't, but you do have some input on the sub-area policy, which is effectively conditioning this project, which is, do I think this could be worked out between now and the board meeting? I think it could, but if it's important for the planning commission to know how it will be enforced before you recommend approval, then you'd have to continue it. I do think there is a way to, I've spoken to our community development attorneys, I believe there is a way to legally enforce this requirement after it's built. This sub-area policy doesn't cover that, but it could be redrafted to do that. But it's not just a legal issue, is my point.
So can we
Because
conditionally
I gotta find a department that's willing to enforce it.
So can we conditionally approve it with the condition that we find a way of enforcing that between now and BCC?
Yeah, I mean, you could approve it with a recommendation that the sub-area policy be modified to provide some enforcement mechanism for the affordability. Some post-development enforcement mechanism for the affordability.
And we would be fine with that, the applicant would.
And I assume for a period of 30 years, is that, you're okay with 30 years?
30 years, that's
Yeah, okay.
a standard, so
Okay.
I think that, I'd be okay with that. No bad on anything else.
Yeah. Okay. Any other questions or comments?
Well, the only thing I wanted to mention is that there's, wildlife came up a couple times by both the residents surrounding it, so you know, at site plan or zoning, there will have to be a protected species or wildlife survey that's done of that area. Any protection measures, whatever that are necessary, or mitigation will be done by the developer at that time.
The substandard road, hasn't this property's
Yeah,
come
that's another
before
one,
us
yeah.
before, and I remember there was a substandard road issue at the intersection.
Excuse me, sir, you can't speak from the chair. You have to come forward, and we're going a little bit out of turn here, so as long as the applicant doesn't mind. Shelley? Do you object to him coming up and having a second?
No, if he has a question, that's fine.
Go ahead.
Sorry. Has anyone done a traffic plan, a traffic assessment of that area?
That'll the next step of this process,
That will be
assuming
done?
this is approved.
Are we approving this project today, or?
No.
They got a long way to go.
Okay.
This is the first step, assuming it's approved today.
I will tell you that there is a statement in the agenda memo that they did do a transportation needs assessment for the plan amendment, and it did not identify any significant impact on the surrounding roadways.
But there'll be additional studies that happen as they do the zoning.
For the rezoning, that's a true statement, yes.
And as they get into the site plan approval. They still have 2 more flaming hoops to jump through before this is.
All right,
And more opportunity for you to
And
come
then they have a
comment.
building department
drive
to
on
go
those
through, so
roads?
They got 3 more
And-
flaming hoops.
Trust me, they're inadequate for the traffic we have now.
Well, I live in the area, I'm familiar with the traffic.
So you know.
But if the study shows that there needs to be improvements made at
5A
their
is,
expense, then that'll come up
5A
in a
is-
future meeting.
And you'll have the opportunity to come back in front of us again at those points.
When they
so.
come for the rezoning,
Yeah.
there'll be another public hearing.
Oh, you guys are gonna let me come back. You guys are great.
yeah.
All right, thank you.
So,
Robert, I know there was a question from the lady in the back about the 5A trail. You just want to clarify that for her so she'll know what it is?
Yes, absolutely. So let me, this slides up. So currently up to kind of where you see the call out, the bottom of that call out is where the trail is existing to this moment. And it's just that segment kind of in between the transit stop and the bottom of the call out that's currently being bid for construction through the county, through project management. And that really doesn't have any impact directly to this project. It's just that it's going to be constructed within 420 days.
So to clarify, it's on the north side of 5A Road.
Correct.
And it's like a bike or walking path.
Yes, it's just going to be a
Follows
continuation.
the same line as the 5A Road.
Exactly, yes, that is correct.
And that last piece is going to connect with the hospital complex?
Yes, it's intending to go all the way up to, I believe, almost 19
Okay.
from there. And also, there was a question earlier about the HOA, and that, I believe that what she was speaking about was there's a park that's connected to that HOA, and I think that might be what she was speaking to, just to clarify.
Okay.
so can I ask Shelley's client a question?
Of course.
Well, first of all, I want to make sure, does Shelley, do you want any more rebuttal now that we had, okay. Can I ask your client a question?
you could state your name and address, please.
Sean Smith, 19409 Blue Pond Drive, Lutz.
So you're basically going to be the developer of the project?
I work for McDowell Housing Partners. I'm the development manager on this project.
Okay. So do you think you'll be able to build it without any state, federal, local funding? Or, I mean, in other words, is the Senate Bill 102 tax exemption enough to get the rents where you need them to be? Or the 50% affordable? Or are you going to need to seek some kind of cash from local, state, federal partners?
Yeah, so traditionally, all of our developments thus far have all been through federal, state partners. That's what McDowell has always done. You know, in terms of SB 102, I don't think that we've definitively decided how we're going to use that, or I mean, workforce housing is, again, a lot different than what we do, right? Because you guys made good points. I mean, a workforce housing developer can come in and commit to that project, but then again, you know, they're going to build it, lease it up, and most likely sell it, right? And that's very different than what we traditionally do as affordable housing developers. Usually we're under laws where we have to own the property for a minimum of 15 years. Most of ours properties, again, have affordability restrictions, laws, as you mentioned, from 30 years to all the way up to 50 years on some of our projects. So again, our traditional path has always been to seek state and federal money. And
But this one's a workforce, right? That's what, at least that's what the sub-area policy is saying, that it's 50%. Because I consider 120 workforce, right?
yeah, well, obviously we have the option to do the 120. Yeah.
So I guess that's what I'm asking. Are you intending to do more workforce here, or are you intending to do low? I mean, because Shelley said it's going to be workforce, but that's not what you normally do. So are you doing workforce here or not? I guess is my question.
I mean, again, you know, we obviously we're waiting for this to be determined to decide our overall plan. But I mean, I would guess that our, you know, overall determination is going to be probably a blended of, you know, mixed income, as you would say, with affordable workforce and some market rate as well.
Okay, and so my original question to you is, can you do that product without any county, state, federal assistance?
Well, definitely not the affordable part, right? Because they're on the affordable part, you're committing to.
Okay, let's just say it was all workforce.
Mm-hmm.
With all workforce, could you provide it solely with the Senate Bill 102 tax exemption?
Yeah, in theory, you can go out and do, again, if you can make a deal work under SB 102 by just getting the tax exemption without any state or federal money, then you could do that. I mean, again, that's not, even if we were to use SB 102, I mean, for instance, I don't know, on Tuesday, the Florida Housing had a workshop, right? So part of SB 102 is it created $150 million that's going to fall under the sale bucket. It's being called innovative sale, and non-affordable, non-LIHTC developers are going to be able to apply for that $150 million, and it's heavily incentivizing doing like mixed income, mixed use projects. Now, again, under that project, which is like, that's something, if we were going to do workforce housing, we would still be targeting state funds through that project, and then you're going to have a 30-year LURA that comes with that state money, right? But in theory, I mean, just from a, I guess, legal perspective, could a developer develop a workforce housing product without any type of LURA? Absolutely, you could. I mean, under SB 102, if you were just seeking the tax exemption and that was enough to make your deal financially viable, you could go out and do that. My understanding so far is that under SB 102, the enforcement is going to be kind of a dual between the county property appraiser's office and Florida Housing. It's going to be kind of a joint compliance in terms of how, to make sure that you get the tax exemption for those units that you've committed between the 80 and 120% AMI.
Yeah, I'm aware that in under 1 and 2, it's, those are the two entities that enforce the tax exemption, but you're making a commitment in the comp plan, presumably to the county, that you're gonna provide at least 50% affordable, so I'm trying to figure out how we're gonna enforce your commitment
No,
to
I
the county.
understand. Yeah, no, it's a great point. I mean, I think that, what our attorney recommended in terms of, maybe that a 30-year commitment or something like that. And again, that's just because for us, we would absolutely be comfortable with that because we know that we plan to develop this product or this project with some form of state or federal money. So for us, it's not a big deal to commit to a 30-year restriction.
You'd be comfortable with 30 years through Allura, a commitment to the county that you would do those things?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, that's not a problem for us at all. Again, some other developers, I mean, you guys are probably aware, and if not, you're gonna be soon. There's a lot of market rate developers who have no idea what AMI and affordable housing are that are getting ready to be moving into this space because of SB 102. Our attorneys, we use, for our real estate attorney, we use Nelson Mullins, and they're a big, throughout the country, and they're saying they're getting calls from developers from Texas, from everywhere, that now want to come do deals. These are market rate developers traditionally, but now they want to come do deals in Florida because of SB 102. So, and again, those developers, traditional market rate developers who are used to going out and raising equity in order to do their developments, they're not going to do the same thing. They're not going to do SB 102 the same way we would. Again, we're going to pair it with state and federal funding because that's how we operate. They're going to develop their SB 102 projects like a traditional market rate project where they're going to raise equity from limited partners and then, yeah, again, sell that property probably at completion and lease up. But again, that's not what we do, so that's why we're fine committing to a 30-year.
Well, and I would
land use
like to thank you on behalf of our board for doing it on residentially zoned property, because Senate Bill 102 allows you to do it on commercial and industrial property, and which our board is not a fan of, so.
Understood.
I appreciate you doing this on residentially zoned property.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. Any comments, questions? Or discussion? I feel a little uncomfortable with approving something that we don't know how it's gonna be enforced. Personally,
Yeah, to be clear, and his comments were helpful to me, because it sounds like he's agreeable to a 30-year LURA to enforce it. That is how we would recommend you enforce this restriction. I think the Sudbury policies need to be modified to say that. My only heartburn about just putting that in there today has nothing to do with this gentleman or Shelley or anybody in this room. It has to do with, I gotta find some department that's willing to enforce it if they don't do financing. That's an internal county issue that, my personal opinion is, I don't know that you should slow it up solely because there's no department here standing up saying, I'm willing to enforce it. Because that's not their fault. That's our fault.
Could we approve it pending you?
Well, I think that's what the earlier suggestion was, that
Yeah.
you approve it subject to the Sudbury policies being amended to create an enforcement mechanism post-construction for a minimum of 30 years.
Yeah.
We'll have to figure that out between now and the board meeting. If we can't find somebody willing to enforce it between now and the board meeting, I guess the board could continue it. But I'm not saying you can't continue it. I'm just saying that I'm not sure it's fair, since he's verbally committing he'll do what I think needs to be done.
Not fair to hold it up.
I'm not sure it's fair to hold them up because we haven't gotten our act together.
Could the BCC in theory create an ordinance to where it becomes a code enforcement type deal? They could create an ordinance to enforce it? Because there's gonna be more than
I'm not
one of
sure
these
code
affordable-
enforcement's the best mechanism either. I think probably the LURA is the best mechanism, as long as there's some notice to the county when they're renting out the project, so we know what it's being rented for. But again, this is not it's not a strictly a legal issue, because Senate Bill 102, putting aside their project, it did create an additional, the legislature just came in and said, county, you shall do this, and we have to figure out how do we enforce it, this affordability requirement. And I'm not sure our community development department is equipped to do it. They're equipped to enforce affordability when they're providing money. They do this already today. Consistent with Mr. Moody's point, if it's like some HUD financed or state financed project, they have existing enforcement mechanisms they use to ensure affordability. That's less clear how we would do that when they're not using, as this gentleman said, now we're gonna start getting a bunch of them market rate builders that are gonna wanna do it probably just for the tax
That's my
exemption.
concern, is this is not the last project we're gonna have to.
This is
worry
probably
about
not gonna,
enforcement on.
this is an issue that they're gonna have to deal with in general, not
The good news is the law sunsets.
10 years.
10 years, yeah.
Yeah.
A lot of development happened in 10 years.
So are you comfortable that you could figure that out within 2 months? Because this goes to the board on this August 22nd.
I'm comfortable that I can legally figure it out. I'm positive.
Just finding the enforcement.
I can't commit to a county department to spend the money to do it. That's the issue. But at some point, the county's gonna have to figure this out because we've been told to do it. So we've got to figure out some way of enforcing affordability even when we don't have money tied to the deal. So,
I mean, personally, for me, I'm not necessarily comfortable holding it up if you know, there is that mechanism, but if we don't have a clear path to kind of how it being enforced, then that's a whole different
If
story.
they think they can work it out before the BOCC,
Right.
I'll make a motion to approve it based on it getting worked out in amended sub-area policies for enforcement prior to the BOCC meeting.
And I'll second that motion. I think it's a fair motion. I think that we all can, well, I shouldn't say all, but it makes sense to move something forward based on, and with the attorney indicating that he can legally find a way to do it.
I will tell you that I believe it is a priority for the county administrator to figure out how to implement the Live Local Act, and I think there's actually meetings occurring as we speak among staff on how we're gonna implement the Live Local Act. So,
We know it's gonna be addressed, it has to be.
yeah, I don't think it's something that we're just letting languish. So, it just hasn't been figured out yet entirely.
You know,
And I
like I
think
said, I
that-
feel comfortable in seconding it, and we've got a motion on it.
Yeah.
I think that the workforce aspect, that housing product is needed up in that area too, so it's, I like the project, so.
Very good.
Yeah, I just, for me personally, I want to make sure that there is going to be an enforcement mechanism. I don't want the board to be able to just pass it without one. That's my problem. Because I think we owe an obligation to those people that live in the neighborhood to make sure that it's enforced.
That was an excellent question, David, I'm glad you brought it up.
I'm not quite sure whether I'm gonna support the motion or not. I'm just gonna say, one, I'm ideologically opposed to this type of development to begin with, because I don't believe affordable housing is not made affordable by redistribution of the wealth. Housing is made affordable by innovation and a real tough look at our 1,500-plus page land development code. Every one of those things imposes a cost. And I will tell you, in being in this business, that the biggest effect on the cost of living or the cost of a home is called the Florida Building Code. And I think the legislature needs to go back and take a big, strong, hard look at the Florida Building Code and how it impacts cost.
Yeah.
I can understand that too. I know in my past, I had some property that I would consider that I owned, rented out, and it was definitely affordable housing. Basically, it was Section 8 housing. But sometimes those individuals that's all they can afford at the time, and I know where you're coming from, John, but I just see it as an opportunity for this particular area up here to develop land that's Could be for rent. There's a hospital in the area. And in my mind, I see kind of nurses going through there a lot. I don't know why. But I see that one profession is nurses needing a place that they can afford. And this may benefit them. I think if a broader picture was available in my mind, I probably would be in the mind not to approve something like this, based on some past experiences that I personally have had. But given the hospital, given medical staff, given that there's transportation site in there, I could see it being a positive for the area. So that's how I see it.
All right.
Could be wrong, could be right.
Any further discussion?
Roll call.
Yeah, right.
Well,
Thank you.
Who made the motion? Did somebody, yeah, you made
I made the motion.
Made the motion.
Peter
And Pete
seconded.
seconded it. Okay, so if there's no further discussion, let's have a roll call vote. All in favor signify by saying aye on a roll call basis.
Mr. Jamie Girardi?
Aye.
Mr. Derek Motlett?
Aye.
Mr. Peter Hansel?
Aye.
Mr. John Moody?
Nay.
Mr. Christopher Poole?
Aye.
Mr. Chris Williams?
Aye.
And Chairman Charles Gray.
Nay. Okay, I think the ayes have it.
All right, so as we wait for my item to come up, my item is PDD 230431. On this item, you're sitting as the local planning agency. So this is the proposing LDC section, new LDC section 605 airport overlay districts. So I apologize for the strike-through underline. It's all bold and underlined because it's a brand-new section. So let's talk about why we're here today. So we're here today, as you know, because we have 4 airports in Pasco County. We have one that is publicly owned, publicly maintained. That is the Zephyr Hills Municipal Airport. We have 2 that are public use airport and privately owned, and those are the Tampa North Aero Park and the Pilot Country Airport. And we have a private use, private owned airport, which is the Hidden Lake Airport. So basically, Chapter 333 Florida statute, which basically stated that all local governments are required to adopt airport zoning regulations that are consistent with that chapter. Those that had already adopted airport zoning regulations had to modify them so they were consistent with the chapter. And it basically states that we had to adopt, administer, and enforce airport protection zoning regulations and land use compatibility zoning regulations. Also, the comprehensive plan, Chapter 2, and there's goals and policies for airport protection, and Chapter 7 in the transportation element, and Chapter 2 being the future land use element. So how we got here, because this has definitely been a journey that, again, started in 2017. The Airport Zoning Commission was put together by the Board of County Commissioners in 2017 and modified in 2021. In 2017, it consisted of the Tampa North Aero Park, Pilot Country Airport, a representative, and a representative from the Zephyr Hills Municipal Airport. In 2021, it was modified to add Hidden Lake Airport. In 2018, Pasco County adopted, well, the Board of County Commissioners adopted interlocal agreements with the City of Zephyr Hills and Hernando County for airport zoning regulations. There was a comprehensive plan update, again, to be consistent, because we did have the comprehensive plan chapters in 2014. They were adopted, but we had to make sure that it was consistent with the 2016 Chapter 333 Florida statutes, and that was done in 2022. Moving forward towards airport zoning regulations, a consultant was hired and did noise contour studies, and that was adopted by resolution of the board. And those noise contour studies are embedded within the ordinance that you're looking at today. In 2022, there was also a moratorium on development around airports, and that's really important because that moratorium is set to expire in August 15th of this year. During this time, we worked with interested parties. There were land use attorneys, planners, engineers. We also worked with AOPA, who is the Airport Aircraft Owners and Pilots Association. We had the Airport Zoning Commission held workshops. The Airport Zoning Commission held public hearings. And this proposed amendment was presented to the horizontal roundtable and interested parties meeting yesterday on June 21st. There will be internal meetings with Planning and Development Department, so there will be training sessions to discuss implementation. This ordinance will be administered by the Planning and Development Department. And if you take a look at Section 60512, it's very important to talk about this with you because this will be, appeals will go to the Planning Commission. So the ordinance in a nutshell basically establishes airport overlay districts. So I'm going to kind of go back and forth between maps looking at this. So the first area is the airport influence area. So in the maps that are embedded within the ordinance, the airport influence area consists of a 2-mile area. So it's 2 miles outside of the center of the runway. And that area is consistent with Part 77 surfaces. So you're going to look at Part 77 surfaces, FAA. In the airport overlay, in the airport influence area, which is the 2-mile area, as I explained, what we're going to be looking at is height. So those are it's going to look at a height check. You're going to look at, there's a table that basically talks about the structures in that area. And if you look at 60510, which is how to actually review the ordinance, those items will be sent, the applicant will be sending those requests through the FAA. And there's an actual notice tool, criteria for notice tool. So as we continue to drill down, the next zone is the airport zone. And the airport zone is the yellow area. And that area is half a mile from the center line of the runway. So that airport zone, what we're looking at there is land use compatibility with airport operations and structure height. So there's a table that you'll look at. You look at the structure height. You look at the table, which is 605-1, which is airport, I'm going to show it to you. Airport overlay districts and land use compatibility. So that basically talks to you about the uses and tells you whether they are compatible, which would say yes, which is a Y. AR means that they could be compatible, so as long as you meet this additional review, and N means that they're not compatible. So that was the airport zone, and again, that's half a mile from the center of the runway.
Back to those for a second.
Absolutely.
More curiosity questions.
Sure.
So I'm looking at the uses, activities that would be prohibited. What's with bakeries, goods, candies? How does that affect an airport?
Which section are we talking about? Are we talking about the runway protection zone, the approach surface floor, the air? Because we haven't gotten to those two.
Any of those.
Okay.
I'm just trying to figure out, how does a bakery affect an airport one way or another?
Right. So I think we need to, can I go through the areas? Okay, right. Thank you. So I'm going to go to the next section, which is the approach surface floor, which is the area when a pilot is taking off or landing. That is an area that needs to be protected. And to answer some of the questions, in that approach surface floor, there are many different uses that are considered additional review. And that additional review could be because that bakery or that location can have a stormwater pond potentially. It could have things that attract wildlife attractants. So those are different things. When you look at the chart, it tells you things that you'll look at with additional review is visibility and glare, lighting, electronic interference, wildlife attractants. So those are things that if you see the AR, that's what, it doesn't mean that it's not compatible. It means that there could be additional review considered when that application comes in, when the site plan comes in.
Yeah, but what I'm trying to get at, okay, so what are we looking at in the review? And a stormwater pond, every development requires a stormwater pond.
Right, so,
Doesn't matter whether it's a bakery or a candy shop or whether it's a car dealership, it requires a stormwater pond.
Right, I understand that. So Mr. Moody, we're not saying that the item is not allowed. We're just basically stating that in the
I understand.
site
You're
plan.
saying that you need additional review, and I'm saying by what criteria, how are we evaluating this use? How is this just not arbitrary? What are the factors in making that decision is the question.
Right, so if you look at the additional review criteria in 605.7, it basically talks to you, and again, I think it makes sense if we want to go through the table together, line by line, that would make sense, because I think the concern is and I haven't gotten yet to the runway protection zone, I've only talked to you about the AIA, the AZ, the ASF, we haven't gotten to the runway protection zone. So if you look at the criteria, it basically talks to you about some of these things. So some of if you look at dry stormwater ponds, those are allowed everywhere because it's a dry stormwater pond. A wet stormwater pond is a concern because potentially in the approach surface floor, but these are things that we have to make sure that you're not, like for example, in a wet stormwater pond, you can use something called bird balls to not attract wildlife in the approach surface floor. And to answer the question regarding the criteria, this is not actually arbitrary or capricious because these actual tables were put together using different airspace and land use compatibility that have been put together through the guideline for the Federal Aviation Administration. I think it's one.
I'm trying to be argumentative.
Right.
I'm trying to understand. It doesn't matter what I build. I might have a dry stormwater pond. I might have a wet stormwater pond. What I'm trying to figure out is this is a land use.
Yes.
What does bakery goods, candy, cosmetics, what hazards do they create that are unique to those uses that affect operations at an airport?
Can I try to help out?
Yes, thank you, I appreciate that.
Microphone on. Okay, let's just back up.
I think
a
you have to
second.
press the
Do I
button.
have to press it? Okay, is that good? All right. So this table that you're looking at here, this actually was based out of Santa Rosa County, which has a very extensive airport zoning regulation, land use compatibility chapter in their land development code because of all the military installations they have in their county. In addition to the military installations, they actually have a publicly owned public use airport about the size of, we think it's about the size of, it's smaller than Zephyr Hills, but
Right, it's kind of sort of like Tampa North Aero Park.
yeah, yeah. So this table is taken from their ordinance with some modifications by looking at actually what we have going on in Pasco County under that approach surface floor. We actually looked at our zoning maps, we looked at our future land use maps, we looked at aerials, the property appraiser's website and so forth to actually see, what is the potential for the actual use of the land in the approach surface floor. The other origin of this table is there is a federal standard in the FAA rules for the feds where they actually have a table like this. It's probably about 20 pages long. And the reason why you see the categories, because at first I was totally stumped too. I'm like, why are we breaking down this industrial and manufacturing categories in these weird, what appears to be arbitrary, boxes when they're all manufacturing? Well, in reading the federal guidelines, they're broken down because of the different nature of the byproduct, or if it's a certain type of manufacturing that requires a taller building to actually do that type of work, or it emits steam or glare or smoke or something. So in the federal documents, they have it broken down to some pretty small minutia, and they also consider on the tables and in Santa Rosa is the floor area ratio, the type of manufacturing that these buildings require. And they also look at the amount of employees that these type of different manufacturing industries require, because one of the things you don't want to have in your approach surface area is a large assembly of people. Obviously, you don't put churches or schools and so forth in the area.
Okay, well,
so that's the origin of the table, if that helps you. Now, apparently, there may be some things that do still seem arbitrary, and there may be something like, and you keep pointing to the bakery one, which I know seems kind of strange, but I would imagine that when someone submits a site plan for creating one of these type of manufacturing uses in that line, there may be absolutely no issues at all. You know, there may be, and then if you actually look at the true reality of what's going on in Pasco County under these areas, almost everything is built out, except for around Zephyr
I
Hills
understand that,
and
and
Pilot
then
Country.
there's the opportunity for redevelopment, and I'm thinking more over in the Zephyr Hills area. Zephyr Hills actually has more, that airport actually has more of opportunity for manufacturing and industry. And so in my mind, assemblage of people, especially in the landing zone, that makes sense to me. I'm just trying to figure out, what does lipstick have to do with an airport or candy? I get it with birds and retention ponds, just having, and my particular concern in this case is, it says additional review will be required. So, and I apologize if I sound overly critical of county staff by saying this, but I deal with this on a daily basis. My clients call to the county, they say, I want to do this, and then somebody says, oh, no, you can't do this because in this ordinance it says this. And then what we find out is, well, they got kind of half the information. And what I'm looking at is, what's the standard by how they're going to be reviewed? Somebody wants to get a little bakery on Main Street, right there by Derek's office.
It
What
actually says-
review is that bakery subject to be near the Zephyr Hills
John, that's not what it
airport?
says, actually. If you read the entire sentence, manufacturing, compounding, processing, packaging, treatment, and distribution of such products as. So it's more than a bakery. It's that entire sentence, it's the manufacturing. So you're looking at the negative aspects that maybe the manufacturing, compounding, processing.
I'm Sugar Darling's
create.
Cupcakes, and I distribute them to 10 stores in the Tampa Bay area, so how are my cupcakes affecting the airport?
You're looking at the manufacturing, compounding, processing, and packaging. You're not looking at the cupcake.
What
But that's not his question.
What does
I
the
think he's
packaging
asking
of the
what
cupcake have to do with the airport?
I'm not a subject matter expert on that.
Okay, but at some point, the reason for the question is that at some point, somebody's going to come in and they're going to have to be reviewed. So if there's no standard by which to review them, that creates a process which then is arbitrary and/or capricious.
Before development can occur in the areas around the airport, in the approach surface area in particularly, prior to the pre-application meeting, the airport operator is to be contacted with a proposal for what they're doing. The airport operators have a lot more expertise onto what type of things would affect safe airport operations
And does
safe
an
air
applicant
navigation.
then have any recourse against a decision made by an airport?
It's
They're not making
comments.
decisions,
They're
they're just
making
providing comments.
to staff that staff would consider. Now, certainly.
Of which then the staff is going to say, well, hey, the people at the airport said this, so therefore.
But this is the opportunity, much like an alternative standard, where if there is a harm that's identified that's legitimately a problem under FAA standards, then you can engineer away the problem. And a perfect example of that is what's happening across the street from Tampa North Aero. There was a discussion had there. Do you have that by any chance?
I don't have
Not in
the-
your PowerPoint?
No, it's not in my PowerPoint.
In that situation, we actually met with the future applicants of property in the runway protection zone at that airport. They had initially gone to the airport, like our moratorium requires, and said, hey, we're thinking of putting some self-storage in here. What do you think? The owner of the airport said he was okay with that. They came to the county and said, you know, we think we want to do professional office instead. And we thought, well, it's probably not a good idea having people in buildings 40 hours a week. Did you talk to the airport? Once the airport learned that they were proposing that, they said, no, that's not a good idea. That's our RPZ, that's our runway protection zone. So through that conversation and looking at site plans, and once they're, what's the name of the engineer we worked with? Fudge?
Yeah, Robert.
Robert Fudge. And Stearns Weaver came in, or the firm representatives from Stearns Weaver, Cynthia Spidell and their attorney, Jessica Eiserman. And they completely agreed that, look, we can redesign our site. That's what the additional review allows for a dialogue, a conversation that's going on during the permitting process. They actually then removed their buildings, put them outside of the runway protection zone, placed their dry detention and their parking lot and street in the actual RPZ, which are allowable uses in the RPZ. And that is only one portion of a very limited number of areas that are actually around these airports that are unbuilt. The majority of it is already built out. That's a really good picture there.
I'm thinking about when you take off north out of Tampa International Airport. You fly over all kinds of warehousing, industrial manufacturing.
Yeah, I think all they're saying, I think, if I understand it, is that, you know, if there's a manufacturing plant that wants to be built in that area, it may, whether they're manufacturing bakery goods or lipstick, you know, they need to be considered, and there needs to be, you know, for example,
And I don't disagree
building
with
height
that.
elevations and things
Yeah,
like that.
and I don't disagree with that. What I'm trying to get to is there a fair process by which these proposals are evaluated? The way I'm hearing it is, well, we're gonna go to whoever the operator of the airport. Well, we've got a new one this week, and this one
Right.
doesn't like this business over here.
Mhm.
And the county staff does not have the expertise on staff, because these aren't aviation experts.
Does the FAA not have a
To
set of
other-
standards that?
That's what I'm getting at, is we need something where there's a standard and there's a process by which they can
Well,
appeal
these
those
are
decisions.
directly from the FAA, aren't they?
The
This
FAA
is actually
has circular
from
after
the
circular
advisory circular.
of standards.
No, using the FAA advisory circular, which is Circular 150, it's the same, it's similar standards.
And I'm not getting at the list of the uses. I understand that. What I'm getting at is the process.
The process by which you say yes or no.
The
Yes.
process is
Correct.
intended, John, to be a dialogue. It's intended to be, we've identified a potential hazard here, how can we engineer away the problem? How can we, that's the whole thing that we contemplated, because we recognize we don't have experts on staff. So when Denise and I drafted this, and we looked at the available resources out there, there aren't a whole lot of bright, fast rules, but there's ways to acknowledge that there might be a harm that should be addressed. And this whole review process takes place during the regular review process of Chapter 300. We've made that clear in here. So it should not slow down projects. It's an opportunity for dialogue.
Well, we know how long that takes.
So it's basically an opportunity for the airport to give their input.
Yeah, and they should.
And they have 15 days,
The
according
airport
to
should
this
have
ordinance, to
the
do that.
input.
So if
What
they don't
I'm getting
provide
at is the airport
information in
says,
15
no, I
days."
don't want that there, for whatever reason. And they may have a legitimate reason. Hey, they're gonna have a smokestack that's 400 feet high that interferes with my, that's completely logical. But the applicant says, I disagree, and I don't believe this is a hazard to aviation. What recourse do they have in this process?
They're going to go to one of the things that they have to do is they have to go to the FAA and get a no hazard to air navigation. So the FAA is going to say there's no hazard to air
That's what I need
navigation.
to
Or they're,
understand.
right, so if you go through the ordinance, it states that. So the FAA could say, well, it could be a hazard to air navigation, but because you're putting this specific lighting which is required under an advisory circular,
So there-
that
okay,
mitigates
so
that.
That's what
gray
I'm,
area.
that's what I'm trying
Yes.
to get to.
Because
So
it
there
could be
is,
potentially, if it's just a dialogue, it could be potentially a gray area.
Right.
So that helps make it more black and white.
Right.
We're also trusting and relying upon, the developers' representatives that want to build a good, safe product to actually, think about these things. And there are ways to avoid, it's like it's my great example. In a tin roof versus a stucco, or tile roof, which one's going to create glare? What makes sense,
yeah, I don't disagree with any of these things. That's all I was trying to get to, is that we have a process
We
that
have a
is
pro-
fair and consistent.
We have a process,
Not
and we will be training the
arbitrary.
team on the process. And those trainings are coming up, I think maybe the first one might be next week. Right.
And I recognize that we're not gonna have, a million applications and we.
You're not, and we could go over what's there or what's already, so for example, because we actually looked at all of these things, something that's very important also to mention is that the existing uses that are in these areas are not considered non-conforming uses. So in other words, there's a house that is within this area. God forbid the house burns down, it get some damage, whatever, the house can be replaced, no problem. Okay? So if you want to go through the inventory, what's in these areas, for example, the most restrictive area, which is the runway protection zone and the approach surface floor. So for Hidden Lake, you know, you've got the college to the southwest, and then you've got a residential area that's built out already. To the northwest, you've got a SwiftMud-owned property, and then you've got some residential property that's already built out. There's no possibility of anything happening in the runway protection zone or the approach surface floor, or even really, for the most part, I'm not going to say 100%, but for the most part in the AZ, in the airport zone. If you look at Tampa North Arrow, again, to the south, that is an I-75 station area where you can get off and kind of like, you know, get some soda or whatever. And then to the south, it's some areas of Seven Oaks. Those are already built out. That's already happening. It's there. To the north, we showed you the parcel that is being developed, and actually they met each and every single requirement of this ordinance as if it were in place, which a portion of the property is in the runway protection zone, and another portion of the property is in the approach surface floor, and another portion of the property is in the AZ. They met all the requirements, and then to the north of that, you've got Lexington Oaks, what is it called? The golf area of Lexington Oaks, and built out. So there's nothing that's going to happen in the approach surface floor or the runway protection zone for the most part in Tampa North Arrow.
What's the radiuses on these two zones, by the way?
Sure. So the runway protection zone starts 200 feet from the edge of the runway, and it goes out 1,500 feet. And the runway and the approach surface floor, it all depends on the size of the runway, but it goes out till about 2,000 or more feet.
What about the airport zone and the influence
The airport
area?
zone is half a mile from the center of the runway.
Okay. In the influence area?
Is 2 miles.
Okay.
Going to Pilot Country Airport, to the south of Pilot Country, as you all know, you've got State Road 52, and then you've got the Connerton Mitigation Bank. So that's what's happening in that approach surface floor. And then to the north, there's actually application being reviewed right now, which a lot of people know it as the Fletcher parcel, which is in for a PD, and I believe there will be an MPUD. And from what I've seen, they've met some things within this ordinance. But, you know, again, there's dialogue and discussion. This is the airport that to the north there is potential for development activity. Again, to the north of this one. And then Zephyr Hills is another one that has a good amount of potential development activity within the AZ and within the ASF as well.
With the Zephyr Hills Airport, we do have an interlocal agreement with the city that's going to be updated as part of this process. There are some things in their actual regulations that are incredibly out of date. They are very happy with this ordinance, so we'd like to incorporate some of this into how they operate. And we've also pointed out in our ordinance here about the two different jurisdictional issues going on here, so that folks who come to the county recognize that they do need to talk to Zephyr Hills as well, because you know Zephyr Hills has their own rules that apply to their Part 77 surfaces, which far exceed the city boundaries, and we've actually acknowledged those through interlocal agreement. So we wanted people to be aware also that Zephyr Hills has some really great plans for expansion. They've received state funding. They've updated their master plan. They're building a new hangar. So we've actually invested money through EDC into in projects there. So there's a lot that potentially could happen out there.
And then one airport that we haven't talked about, which is Brooksville, that is also spoken of in the ordinance. So as you can see, their conical surface, which is that red surface, that actually falls within Pasco, and all we're going to look at there is height. That's all that is going to be reviewed there.
Denise, while you're on that point, so from a height perspective, and you may discuss when I stepped out, is that an FAA determination, or
Yes.
is that?
Yes,
Okay.
it's an FAA determination.
So you guys will not be
We'll
doing
we'll ask the folks, hey, you've got to check with FAA.
Okay.
And you do the notice criteria tool, check with FAA.
And there's a link in the ordinance that takes
It
you
is.
to
Right.
the website.
Okay, cool.
So that's my presentation for the item. It is a very, we're trying to, and I'm also showing the noise contour maps that were adopted by the board.
So explain, I mean, I understand what these represent. What land use restrictions are associated with a contour?
Sure. So Chapter 333 Florida statutes basically states that if you're outside, like in other words, if you're higher than 65 DNL, in that area you shouldn't have residential, you shouldn't have a school, for example, unless it's like a pilot school. But those are things that are restricted by state statute. We have a very unique situation in Pasco County that all of these airports are actually airport communities. So you purchase into this community because you're a pilot, you actually put some folks put hangars and different things that are related to aviation. So those 65 DNL, they actually fall within the airport community. So they don't fall within any residential areas. So this is part of the process that I found very interesting because Elizabeth and I and other folks on staff, we actually went to many of these airports and witnessed the noise and witnessed all these things. And we were very sure that the noise contours were going to be a lot larger. But when they were put together, they were they're very compact.
Is that the case for Pilot Country
Yes.
too?
Yes.
Okay.
One of the things that you didn't talk about, Denise, is the actual relationship between that 65 DNL and the yellow oval on the overlay. If you are coming to the county, and this is section 605.9, airport noise contours, and it talks specifically about having to put restrictions or put language in your deeds and in your leases that, hey, you're coming to an airport, there's noise, because the airports do get calls, they get complaints, the county gets complaints, Zephyr Hills gets complaints all the time. But we have in our moratorium ordinance, you've got to put folks on notice if you're going to be developing during the moratorium. So the board liked that a lot, we carried that forward. But the only folks that have to worry about doing that extra step as a requirement of development is if you're inside the yellow
AZ.
to the 65 DNL. So that's the purpose of the yellow there. It's really for that purpose, so you know where you can stop requiring someone to put that language in their deeds, okay?
Okay, any other questions?
So I do also want to say that we've met with all but one commissioner individually and gone over this ordinance with each individual commissioner. We are hoping that, so this is going to go for first reading on the 11th of July at 1:30 in Dade City, and for adoption on 8/8 of this year at 1:30 in Dade City. That 8/8 date is very important because our moratorium will expire on 8/15. So we are asking that you find the proposed ordinance amendment consistent with the Pasco County Comprehensive Plan and recommend approval to the Board of County Commissioners.
All right,
So,
thank you.
so I am familiar with that project that's coming in by Pilot Country, and I assume that y'all have met with that applicant, and I know that.
That applicant has had a pre-application meeting, and that applicant has also submitted the plans to the airport zoning manager for Pilot Country.
Okay, cool.
And
Thank
that
you.
person has provided comments, and there's nothing significant in terms of comments.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, is there anyone here for public comment? I don't see anybody jumping up.
Mr. Chairman, I just wanted to reiterate your question.
Yeah.
So Denise, we have a couple of schools that are in those areas. I just wanted to confirm that if we do a remodel or something, as long as we're not taking something from 1 story to 8 story or something, we don't have an issue.
Right, yeah, so basically, there is a statement in the actual ordinance that states that things that are existing within any of those zones, the ASF, the AZ, the AIA, those are not considered non-conforming. If you needed to do any remodel or anything, you can work on that. Because had we considered it non-conforming, then you would be limited to the percentage of the remodel, or you would be limited to, like, God forbid that something is more than 50% damaged or destroyed.
Right.
You couldn't rebuild it. We didn't want that to happen to those folks that were within that area.
Okay, great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, so having no one else to speak, do I hear a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any
Wait.
further discussion? Yes, sir.
Roll call. You asked for public comment, right?
Yes, I did.
It's the motion to find the ordinance amendment consistent, correct?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
See.
Okay.
Mr. Jamie Girardi,
Aye.
Mr. Derek Pontlitz.
Aye.
Just for the record, Mr. Peel Hansel is absent from the vote. Mr. John Moody,
Aye.
Mr. Christopher Poole,
Aye.
Mr. Chris Williams,
Aye.
and Chairman Charles.
Aye, and just for the record, I would like to say Denise and Elizabeth, you did a great job on that. That was a tough one. I know you put that together.
Thank you.
Probably 6 years in the making.
It's been years.
Yes.
It's been
starting
years,
and
but
stopping.
it's been starts and stops. But yes, I do. Can I please say that I'm super duper grateful to Elizabeth? She has.
No, you can't say
She's
that.
been my partner in crime on this. I
First
think
Chuck sucks
we
up, then
probably
Denise
the
sucks up. I
ones
mean, come
that
on.
have been consistent through this process, because there have been so many staff changes and different things. But I also do want to, there's so many people to be grateful to. And I'm grateful to them in my heart. But I also want to say that Daryl Johnston with GIS has been absolutely amazing. He's the one who did all those. Every time we had any issues with maps, hey, can you fix it? Immediately he would. This is a standout person, so I just want to make sure that he's.
And all those different zones are obviously going to be part of GIS. so
Absolutely, yes.
it'll be easy.
So Jeremy, who's the the head of GIS, he's like, can I do it right now? I'm like, no, Jeremy, you have to wait till it is adopted and effective, so don't pull the trigger yet. So, yes.
I really do like the nosing requirements too. That's really, really good stuff that's in there, so.
Yeah.
Good job. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good job, yo.
Thank you. Okay. Do I hear a motion?
Motion to adjourn.
There we go.
Roll call.
I will make you do roll call on that one.
Chris, you better be
I
here next time.
don't see Chris voting it.
Chris can stay on Zoom. Big news for the afternoon.
Well, I didn't want to
I
call
take
on
that as
people
an aye.
who didn't
That's
say.
the big news for the afternoon.
Waterways and wildlife depend on you to keep them healthy. Excess fertilizer, grass clippings, trash, oils, and pet waste wash into gutters and storm drains when it rains. Stormwater carries these pollutants directly into our lakes and rivers, creating an unhealthy environment for fish, waterfowl, and other aquatic animals. Storm drains are meant for clean rainwater. Most other discharges are illegal. If you suspect an illicit discharge, please contact Pasco County Department of Public Works at 727-834-3611.
Hi, I'm Angelo Lorenzo, Regional Manager at the New River Library. We're putting on the final touches at your favorite branch. There are lots of changes inside and out, starting with the parking. As you know, we've moved the entrance drive to the east side of the building, and on your way to the parking lot, you pass a book